All right, so I just wanted to hop into Ableton and do a quick breakdown of If Only. If you haven't had a chance, check it out. It's available on all streaming platforms. Please go do so, add it to your playlist, send it to a friend, save it. Everything helps a ton. Also want to take a quick second to say that we now have merch, currently rocking an Otherwise Fine dad hat as well as hoodie. So shop otherwisefine.com and stream If Only. That would be awesome. So taking a look at the project file, usual setup. So have everything bust according to piano, some audio effects, orchestral elements, the guitar, the Vox, that's the Vox Trop, the lead, which is kind of that vocal lead that comes in on the 4 on the floor section, the verse synths, the drop synths, bass, kick, all the drums, my vocals, and the effects. And then here I have all of the old project files that I was using in the final stages of mixing and mastering to kind of reference where I wanted to take it, what needed to be changed, etc. Now, the original project file from this dates from 2019. I'll open that up in a second. But it's been a long time that I've been working on this track. A lot of things have been bounced out at different points. So it's been a bit of a mess to try to do this breakdown. So this is the latest version of the track. So almost everything is bounced out. So the piano is bounced out. The audio effects are bounced out. The orchestral elements are bounced out to a single stem. Everything but the drums and the vocals have been bounced out to a single stem. And then I've also added in a few additional effects elements. So the effects were bounced out to a stem. It's clearly searching in the wrong area for it. And then there's a few other elements that I wanted to add in. But yeah, pretty much everything has been bounced out. So I will jump into the old project file to go over the piano, the orchestral elements, the lead, as well as the drop synth and bass. But I'll just stick in here for a second to talk about the audio effects. So I've mentioned this before in other breakdowns, but I'm a huge fan of adding these kind of Foley or melodic air elements to all the tracks. Mostly because they bring the track to life. So here, for example, I can do the intro just with piano, which sounds pretty normal. But adding the audio effects, we get this. So that's just a sample running through some crystallizer, reverb, delay, etc., which gives it a bit of a sparkle, which I find is pretty crucial to take a track from sounding stale to giving it a little more life. All right, so looking at the drums for the project, probably the most simple drums out of any Otherwise Fine track. So in the verse, we just have a clap. Transitioning into the build, there's a ride, paired alongside some toms. Moving on to the chorus, there's the claps with a crash, snare loop, that transition, a little drum loop there, and then on 4 on the floor, it's kind of hat and snare. Super simple stuff. That ride loop comes back in with the tambourine on the second half, and then we're back to claps. We have a bit of kind of orchestral toms in the second build with some sticks, as well as these kind of taiko hits alongside that. Those toms, and then we bring that back to the same drop, except for this time add in a little bit of those taiko hits, just to give it something. But yeah, that's essentially the drums. Pretty simple for compared to most Otherwise Fine tracks, where we might have 50 drum tracks. Just got essentially claps and hats for the most part there. The other thing I'll talk about for this project before jumping into the original project is the vocals. So I did the vocals in 2 project files, actually. I did a tracking project file, did all the comping and tuning in there, and then I brought them into a vocal mix project during which I took a stem of the instrumental and did a rough mix of the vocals. And then I brought those rough mixed vocals into the project file here, and then did a bounce down of those. So we have the vocals on their own, with all the processing printed. If I turn those on. If only you knew. And then we also have the original demo vocals. So I actually really liked the demo vocals and decided to keep them in. If only you knew. Because the original demo vocals were a little brighter and a little more wet. They were recorded just with an SM58 right here in this chair. So they had a bit of room noise in them. A couple more. I fell asleep, and before I know a couple of uncertainties in the performance. But yeah, overall, I had a bit of demo-itis, was really in love with the demo vocals because I'd heard them so many times. So I decided to layer them in I fell asleep with the actual final recorded vocals. But yeah, so those are printed, and then I'm actually using those vocals to sidechain everything. So I'm running most of the elements through Soothe in sidechain mode. I have that turned off right now just to save a little bit of CPU, just to give a little bit more space to the vocals, which is a great trick for anyone with Soothe. If you're not aware, you can actually run things into it, and it acts as a Kickstarter, sorry, not a Kickstarter, a track spacer on steroids. Way better than track spacer. Highly recommend doing a little bit of sidechain to your vocals on your melodic elements to create that tad bit of space that a lot of vocals can often need. All right, so that's this project file. Let's jump into the original project file. All right, so here we are back in the original project file of If Only. This project file dates back to fall of 2019. Since then, there have been many different versions of this project file. I think the final version of the track was around version 11. Within that timeline, there was tons of audio being bounced. There was different projects for the mixing, the mastering, for the vocal projects. But this is the very first demo, and I wanted to bring it up for a few reasons. The first being it still has the audio before most of the processing of that kind of vocal lead sound on the drop. It still has all the MIDI for the piano. And then additionally, I wanted to show the comparison between this very first demo version and the final mixed and master version, just to see the stark difference between where something can start and where it ends up. But to start, let's start with the piano. So one thing I really enjoy about this track and pretty proud of is the fact that the chord progression seems to always be evolving and changing and pushing forward, despite it essentially just being a 4-chord song. There's a few different techniques that help this. The first being that the track starts by removing the second chord of the progression. So the track just starts with 3 chords. So what that does is it allows for the track to have space and build tension by holding that first chord twice as long, so that when the verse comes in and you have that chord anticipating on that second beat, it feels like the track is now pushing forward and has more energy. So that happens in both verses, and I think it allows a track a room to breathe after the chorus by bringing it back to 3 chords, and then again push forward on that second verse, adding in that second D chord that makes it a 4-chord progression. The other thing that helps a lot with this is the fact that each section of the track has a unique aspect to the chords. So even here in the intro, despite it being 3 chords, on the second time around, we have slight variations in the chords. So here we're taking away that high F sharp, and then on the last time we're adding the high E. So just super subtle variation that doesn't make it feel like just this 3 chords kind of looping around. On the verse, again, same technique where the second time through, we're using different variations of each chords in terms of the extensions and which upper notes are being left in the chord. Specifically on that last chord there. And then moving into the verse, again, we kind of have these extensions playing that little top line melody. So it kind of gives the impression that the song is starting to evolve, and again, we're moving up in the register to build energy. So all of this culminates into the chorus. Now in the chorus, there's only one chord that changes. So again, we're dealing with B, D, F sharp, and instead of E, we now have an A. And that A gives all of the tension because again, despite the fact that the chords have sounded like they've been changing and evolving, it's just been the same 4 chords every single time. So in the chorus, when that finally comes around and we get that A, it just feels so new and builds a ton of tension, in my opinion. So that is the same on the first and the back half of the track. But personally, I really enjoy how that makes the track feel like it's constantly changing, and you never get the same chords twice. Looking at the piano themselves, again, this is a super old project file. I'm a huge fan of layering my pianos. I'm not sure if I would have kept all of these pianos in the final stem. I'm a big fan of the Labs piano, of Giant Native Instruments, Alicia Keys Native Instruments. Something I'm also a fan of doing is layering an octave up of the Labs piano. So here we have the kind of main octave, and then layered 1 octave above with a little bit of room reverb and some EQ just to give it a bit of shimmer. Similarly, the Giant is being layered for a little bit more depth in the piano sound. The other thing I'm a big fan of doing is bouncing and reversing the piano into itself. The Alicia Keys, generally I'll toss on Alicia Keys if I want something a little more transient, which is probably the case here. Yeah, so super just kind of attacky, just help the piano kind of cut through the mix. And then this would be the melody, I guess. Yeah, the melody line. So nothing too complicated going on with the pianos there. When it comes to the lead, so this is a great example of kind of looking back at your old project files and wondering what you were doing and why you were doing that. So unfortunately, I do not have the original version of the lead. So this is the raw audio that I have as far back as I can go. And it sounds something like this. So that would have just been me humming a melody, probably into my SM58, and I guess running it through some auto-tune, maybe a tad of vocoder. I think at the time I was trying out a demo of Isotope's vocoder, and was kind of in the idea of using that. To be honest, I'm not too sure. It sounds like there's already some OTT on there, but yeah, it's just me doing a dumb melody into a mic. Let's see if this goes out. Yeah. So this is me just trying out different. Yeah, this is just me trying out different vocal ideas, and clearly I settled on this. Now that is going through a ton of different effects that, frankly speaking, don't make any sense when I look at them now, but they work. So with all of the effects, it sounds like this. And again, this is an earlier project file, so in later projects, I was definitely cleaned up. But I think that was what was essentially bounced down and what I was working with in terms of the raw stem. So looking at it one by one, I'm running it through a room reverb at 100% wet. Again, don't know why I would have done that. Probably just to throw it back in space. Then I'm throwing a bit of echo on it, which you can't really hear. Just gives it a bit of a tail. I'm throwing a ridiculous EQ on it. Then running it through some OTT, some overdrive, which is giving it like some nice crunch. Then I'm running it through another reverb. Again, no idea why I would have done that. Then some more saturation. Some compression. Even more compression. And then 3 more stacks of some ludicrous EQs. These were turned off, the auto filter and reverb, so I don't think I was using those. But I guess the takeaway from this is sing dumb things into a mic and then run it through ludicrous processing, because sometimes it works. So yeah, that is the vocal lead. Now, since we're in the old project file, I also wanted to take a look at a little bit of the mixing, or lack thereof. So looping over this section of the drop, we can hear the difference between the original demo and then the final mastered version. Now I have brought this down 12 dB, so the gain is a little more similar. But so this is the original kind of demo. All the elements are still there for the most part. Kind of have some synths popping out of the mix there. The vocal is super buried. Yeah, a little bit of a mess compared to after 2 years of mixing, kind of tweaking, and a solid master. Night and day difference, hopefully for the better. All right, so continuing with this original project file, we can actually dive into some of the elements. So here, again, we have the orchestral elements. So in that second half, there are some strings and brass that come in. That's just native instruments, string ensemble and brass ensemble. And then there's also these kind of spiccato strings that come in and give a little bit of stab motion right there, which I'm a big fan of. It's one of my more favorite moments of this track. So that builds with the brass kind of moving upwards into the drop, where we have these brass stabs that actually sync up with the kick. So those are there to kind of reinforce the track. So with the drop here, and then without them, super subtle, but if you listen for it, they're there. That's something that also kind of changed throughout the progression of the track. Those got mixed up a little higher, but a big fan of that little orchestral element. The other thing that I can dive into a little more detail is the synths. So here is all the different synths. So I have it broken up in this project file into synths and drop synths. It's because I was going a little crazy with the layers back when I first produced this. Probably wouldn't do this nowadays, but there's a few different synths that carry out the entire track. So here is the first. It's kind of this like reverbed out stab. That's giving a little bit of space. Then there's kind of a high pad. This is the this is for the pre-chorus. So that's the little melody. Here's more of a kind of build synth. So this comes in real low at the beginning, and then the filter cutoff opens up. Another high pad, and I believe this is kind of giving a little bit more of the grit. So this is providing a lot of the body, with a lot of the other synths providing space and some high frequency content, as well as, again, this one Porter synth that opens up throughout the track. There's also a drone that comes in over top of the chorus. If I solo that, that just comes in, which is just a super, super slow attack on Diva, running through some reverb, compression, auto pan, etc. Gotta turn that up. You hear it going between the ears. So again, that's just providing some movement super, super subtly in the background of the mix. For the bass, a few different basses, one just being a Reese bass, it's sub. On the drop, the first drop, there is a square bass, kind of doing the role of an 808. And then there's these two other basses that occur throughout the track. The first is kind of the stabby bass. So that's just underneath during the kind of pre-chorus build section. Again, just try to push the whole track forward. It's pretty subtle, but it's up there in the mix. You should be able to hear that. And then this bass comes in again on the 4 on the floor section with a bit of a counter. So that's following the original kind of first drop bass pattern, and these two basses kind of play off each other. So in solo, so there's a bit of a call and response. This was a nightmare to mix. Probably wouldn't do that now, but yeah, it's in there. So there's tons of movement in the bass. That was one of the reasons why this took about 2 years to finish. In terms of the drop synths, again, something that I wouldn't do probably as much of now, and took a while to kind of dial in the mix, is layering. So hard pan left and right, with one down the middle to create the super saw. Then to layer that super saw, there's these little mids that are doing kind of that. Is that LFO or no? So that would be in serum running through to kind of give it the movement. There's kind of that same my go-to Rufus patch that's in the verses that comes back in, that's kind of giving that wobble and providing a lot of the mids slash a bit of the low mids. Then there's this kind of almost white noise top end. And then this kind of like sign pad that I wanted to use to get a little bit more attack and a little bit more width. Then on the second half, there's this, whatever this is, I guess half bass, crunchy, I don't know. Again, this is what happens when you produce a song over 2 years, is a lot of things kind of get left in there. You revisit them and you think, why did I do that? All together, essentially the drop bass there. The stabby part, kind of the future bass part, it's the same synths, just playing the same pattern. Sorry, different pattern. With yeah, I ended up getting that element. So yeah, that's the synths. Nothing complicated going on. Just a lot of, frankly speaking, unnecessary layering. which is one of the reasons, again, why there's so many projects of this. Is a lot of bouncing to audio, mixing, kind of coming back, tweaking things, trying to get everything to sit right. Because obviously, if we listen again to this, it's a lot muddier, missing a lot of kind of clarity in the mids, a lot of high end frequency. So quite different than the final mix down. Even though it's essentially the same elements. I think along the way I probably maybe would have added and removed some elements, but essentially it's those usual suspects in terms of what's in there. I think that about covers everything that I haven't touched on. In terms of the audio effects, just some samples, running through Crystallizer and Valhalla and whatnot. But yeah, that's about the project. As usual, happy to answer any questions that I did not cover. But other than that, hope this was useful. And yeah, go stream If Only. Available everywhere now.